Hey everybody, welcome back to Video. So, Terasic series on the MiSTer FPGA DE10 Nano project. If you haven't heard already, the Sega Saturn Core has been updated again, bringing in one of the most wanted fixes for pretty much any game on Sega Saturn. Shining Force 3 now has no freezing problems as far as anybody has tested after this core has come out, but we got a lot more with that we'll be going through in the video. Before we get too far involved, though, do me a huge favor, down below hit like and subscribe and ring that notification bell, definitely helps us out. And if you feel so inclined to want to support the channel, we got a Patreon link down below as well. But we've talked about Shining Force 3 so many times on this testing series. It used to be that you would get into the game and it would freeze pretty much every time you used a certain spell. Then that got fixed up, but then random freezes would occur in battles on basically any turn. It would never be predictive. You'd basically start a battle and at some point in time a random freeze would come in. Now this core has been out for about 12 hours as of the recording of this video, and I haven't seen a single instance of anyone being able to freeze this game. And that is awesome because that means SRG320 has found the issue in the overall FPGA code and has patched it up, because this is a previous capture. I'm showing you what it would do in the past, and then we'll talk about what it currently does. That way if you don't watch every single video, you better understand. You would be going through the battle sequence, whether it's the first battle, the 5th battle, the 10th battle, somewhere in there, and you would end up with a lock just like this. It would be completely random. Now we've moved over to a more recent capture on the current core, and you're going to see that that freezing is completely out of all of the battles. The overworld is perfectly fine, navigating around, talking to people. This was always relatively stable. It was when you would get into a battle sequence where that freezing could occur, and it does seem to load relatively quickly. You'll go into a battle, the screen will black out, and you'll come back into a different camera view. So it seemed like there was something in that transition, or in some transitions, that may have been tripping up the core. Now, and I am not cutting this, I'm just letting it play so you can understand how it blacks out and then comes back into the engine. You'll see that everything seems to be perfectly fine, and because we do have GRAD shading in as well, everything looks even better as well. This is still the type of situation, though. Maybe this thing freezes 80 hours into the game. You can play this game for dozens upon dozens upon dozens of hours, and even still, with all of the improvements, no one has been able to beat the game because no one's had that much time. But with this current update, it seems like it's now time for somebody to make that attempt. Just make sure you save often and back up those saves just in case. But now all of the different effects, the GRAD shading, all of the transitions, and that freezing problem seem to be completely ironed out. And that means it seems like we have a rock solid stable Shining Force 3, and that is awesome because when people think of RPGs on the Sega Saturn, this game is going to make pretty much every single list of best Saturn RPGs of all time. It's unique, it's inventive, and now on the current core, it just seems to be running well, and I'm pretty sure, if I had to guess, those transitions between the overworld map and the engine and some of the different calls to different hardware on the Saturn must have been tripping it up in the freezing issue, but today, you're good to go. Now another game that's had its freezing issues fixed is Discworld, and before you go down to the comments below, yes, I know I'm showing you Discworld 2 footage because I've already talked about Discworld recently, and Discworld 2 is a game I haven't shown on test and figured you guys would want to take a look at because both of these games are super charming point-and-click adventure games that work incredibly well on the Saturn, and now both of them are going to be infinitely playable on the current core. These are just the type of games, if you love point-and-click adventure games and you've never played, you 100% have to. But tell me down below, if you ever played Discworld, I'd be curious, because I didn't play this when it first came out. I probably played this maybe 10 or 15 years ago when I picked up cheap copies on the Sega Saturn. But it's another game that people remember, and it's another game today with the current core that you can play without any sort of freezing issues. And Discworld used to work relatively well, but then there was a regression in a core that would cause it to freeze again. So whether it's Discworld 1 or Discworld 2 you want to play, you're able to play both of those on MiSTer FPGA today, and it seems like you're going to be able to finish both of them. But last time I showed you guys any Discworld content, there was some issues in the audio. You would get those popping and clicks where the audio track would basically clip out and be too loud. Another great thing with the most current cores is not only do these games not freeze anymore, especially Discworld 1, they also have what I would consider to be exactly the same accuracy on the audio front that real Saturn hardware has. Listen for 45 seconds and I'll be right back.
I think it's probably time for me to take my medicine. That's not going to help you.
Sounds exactly like it should, and I do love that trippy sort of hippie vibe going on in that one area. And again, if you've never played Discworld or Discworld 2, check them out. If you're not a huge fan of point-and-click adventure games, I don't know if there's going to be anything here for you that's going to convince you into loving the genre, but you can play it, you can save, everything works, and if you do like this sort of game, you're good to go as of today. Now, moving on to a game that I've got a lot of request tests for, that is going to be Primal Rage. And I'm going to say right now, I've never really understood Primal Rage. I've never clicked with it. I've never enjoyed it that much. I'm happy that you're happy that you love this game, and I'm happy to show you test footage of it. But someone leave me a comment down below and tell me exactly what am I missing with Primal Rage. I've just never felt that the fighting engine or any of the overall characters have really done it for me, but that just might be a personal thing. I'm never here to tell you games aren't good, I'm just here to say what my opinion of them is, and if you love Primal Rage, you're going to have a very good experience here. Every once in a while, the game still does seem to like to freeze on a load, but that seems like 1 out of every 10 times. If you don't get it to freeze, you can play the game perfectly fine. It's something I will check in on in the future. But as far as the gameplay, as far as the graphics are concerned, as familiar as I am with Primal Rage, this seems to be working relatively well here today. And I've always loved the theming of this game. Gigantic kaijus battling with human beings in the background. It's always had a good sense of charm. It's just something about the mechanics that I've never really been able to gel with, but this does seem to be playing exactly like we'd expect on MiSTer, and big thanks to Andy D for helping with some of the captures this week as well. But I do love the animation style, that kind of Ray Harryhausen claymation look to the monsters. That is something I've always actually appreciated. I don't know that I love the design as far as some of their animation is concerned, but the overall claymation, sort of old Hollywood monster movie vibes, I'm 100% there for that. I would just say that it's one of those things. Not everyone clicks with every single game. There's some games that I absolutely love that most people think aren't good, and vice versa. But Primal Rage on the MiSTer Core today is a fun experience. Like I said, there might be an occasional freeze here or there, but for the most part, everything looks good. From the backgrounds to the animation of the small islanders, to the parallax scrolling, to the sprites on the characters themselves, I don't see anything in the visual glitch department here that would make me think it's doing anything other than it would on real Sega Saturn hardware, and some of the wind animations are particularly charming as well. And that's the fun thing about a library like the Sega Saturn. It is big, it is expansive, and there's something for everyone to love. So even if I'm not the biggest fan of a particular game I test, if you are, you get to hear the news that for the most part, outside of a few random and intermittent freezes, Primal Rage is good to go on the core, and I'll check back in future cores to see if that freezing's been fixed. Now let's take a look at another game that's seen improvements on the GitHub patch notes in recent cores, and this is Monster Slider. It's basically Tetris meets Puyo Puyo meets Hammer horror movie monsters in a very weird and very charming game. If you're into puzzle games, you never played this one before, I can't recommend it enough. There is a lot of fun to be had here. And at least through the title sequence and how to play, everything looks perfectly fine. All of the graphics are drawing correctly, all of the music is good, everything here is just as you would expect. And again, this may be a game that not many people have ever heard of before, so tell me down below in the comments if you knew about Monster Slider or if you're discovering it here for the first time, because a lot of fun in these cores is a sense of discovery of new games. But the best part is the sound works 100% and the voice acting is absolutely charming and hilarious, so go ahead and listen for 30 seconds and I'll be right back with a little more. そんな店知らないよーだわ許せざますお湯は知らせてやるざますよお前がリーダーざますね父臭い小娘がドラキュラ様に逆らうとなんて許さざますそんな店知らないよーだですわ許せざます I don't know what it is about the voice acting, but it always makes me smile when I hear it. It just is such a strange thing indeed. And that's the fun thing about testing these cores and testing the games. For every single Panzer Dragoon or Daytona USA or Sega Rally, there's a game like Monster Slider, one that is not as big, not as well known, but still fun, still charming, and still 100% worth your time on the Sega Saturn Core or even on real hardware. So if you've never played this game before, definitely give it 5 or 10 minutes. It takes a couple seconds to wrap your head around exactly what the game's asking of you, but once you actually get into it, you start playing more, it really does get its hooks into you, pun very much intended, because that skeleton has a scythe, but otherwise definitely just play it, take my word for it. As the current situation with the current Sega Saturn Core, of course I've got more testing videos coming up, including a few videos where I test one game for a longer period of time to show you more about what that long-term experience is like. But if there's any games I haven't tested on the channel recently and you want to know how they're running, just leave me a comment down below and I try to get to each and every one of them. Sometimes it takes me a few weeks, sometimes it takes me a few months, but I always try to make sure each and every one of your requests is taken care of. Try that, it's time to go play some Saturn. We're done here and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.